Good day. This is Amber Narrow on KSLU's 90.9 FM. I'm here today with the artistic director of the Columbia Theater and also author and now docuseries actor, voiceover, celebrity, Gary Stewart. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have y'all today.
Oh, thank you.
Very good.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Yes, we've got Gary on the phone with us today, and Jim's live in the studio in case anybody's watching us on the video. But we're very excited. We've got these cool headphones that we're listening to you in, Gary. We look very official today.
I'd love to see it. I wish I could be there in person.
Absolutely. We're going to start with you, Gary, a little bit because it's been a little while since we've talked to you. I think we had Susan, your co-author, for The Most Dangerous Animal of All here last semester. She was actually talking a little bit, or I guess it was maybe January, maybe December even last year, but she was talking about putting some fiction stuff together, and we'll have her back again soon. And today we're lucky enough to have you as well, telling us a little bit about what's going on with The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Now, this book came out in 2014, 15? Yes.
5 years.
Wow. So over the last 5 years, you've been kind of researching how to get this into film, worked with several different things, and finally something struck and is sticking. Tell me about that journey.
So we were visiting with you at Southeastern, and your advanced literary class there was one of the first public visits that Susan and I did together.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say you've played a significant part in my journey, and I want to thank you for that.
Too much credit,
Dr.
but thank you.
She manages the majority of The Most Dangerous Animal of All social media and so forth, and she's very helpful. And but anyway, when we first visited, when we first visited Southeastern, we actually had a film deal. We signed a film deal before the book was actually published. And 5 years, what happened? Well, that film deal was with CBS, major network, and it was for a 2-part 4-hour miniseries. So it was going to be completely dramatic. We were going to try to incorporate some of the nonfiction elements and some of the development since the book came out into that.
Right.
And Les Moonves was such a big anchor there at CBS. The lady who was our champion, Nina Tassler, she loved the project. She loved the story, and she just championed us all the way up to Les's desk. And when she realized that she wasn't next in line and he wasn't going anywhere, they thought they were going to carry Les Moonves out in a box from CBS. He was just going to be there forever. She retired. She went and found a new gig. And when that happens, whether it's with a book and a major publisher or a television movie series, documentary, you get orphaned.
Yeah.
And we lost our champion. But the guy who took Nina's place tried. We went to casting, believe it or not. We solicited, who did we go to? Kiefer Sutherland to play my role. He was working on a then just recently announced project called Designated Survivor. So he had to say no. He didn't have time on his plate. We went to the other guy, and I apologize for not remembering his name. He is the guy who was Spinoza he plays Bull now. Michael Weatherly. Went to Michael Weatherly, and he had just left, what's that show with Mark Harmon? One of the crime dramas. Anyway, he left that show. We thought he had some availability. He had just started doing the Bull series, which is, of course, a story about Dr. Phil's former life.
Right.
And so after that, after we got 2 rejections, CBS finally officially canned us. In the meantime, between now and between then and last year, we actually sold the film rights to a documentary company, and it went nowhere. There was a reason for that. And then last March or so, got a phone call from one of our agents, and she said, there's this young guy who's really shaking it up on Netflix. His name is Ross Dinnerstein, and he's done some things with Stephen King. He's done lots of documentaries. He is just thrilled about your book and would love to talk to you. So instantly we had chemistry.
Now,
and,
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, because we've got somebody in the house today who's got some experience working with films. Does this kind of sound familiar to you, that it just kind of takes a while, Jim, to get some of these things through?
It often can, and at every level, really, whether you're shopping a script or even as an actor, it's a war of attrition. But it sounds like we're getting to the part of this story that we all hope for when you find somebody you really make a connection with, and that can really launch things into overdrive.
Right. So then what happens, Gary?
Well, it's been a journey. I could, if I had any energy, I could convince my partner in crime, Susan Mustafa, to write book number 2 about this entire journey, because it would be more extensive than The Most Dangerous Animal of All. But
wow.
So met this guy on the phone. We had chemistry, and he said, I want it. I want to tell your story. And so we did the deal. It takes the agents a while. We signed a deal, and this time it felt right, though. CBS felt good. I'm still friends with the screenwriter from who wrote the story for the miniseries. He's doing well and other things, but this felt real. And
right. Now tell me, let's kind of jump into the story a little bit as well, because this is the thing that kind of grabs these folks, right? And tell me, let's, in a nutshell, because it is a long story, but can you kind of summarize why this is such a great docuseries?
So why it was picked up is because there's an interesting hook at the end of the story. Basically, my parents were fugitives from San Francisco and ended up in New Orleans, pregnant, broke, desperate. I was born in New Orleans. My father took me by train back then, the old Southern Belle, to Baton Rouge. He walked 7 blocks up from the river from the train station, and abandoned me in an apartment building, what was an 8-plex, I guess, maybe, back then. And about noon, and a lady
as an infant
who lived there. As an infant, I was 30 days old, 4 weeks old, and I was found by a lady trying to get to her apartment. She actually had to step over me on the stairwell where I was abandoned to get to the phone to call the police to say, I've got this baby crying on my stairwell. And anyway, I was adopted. Once they apprehended my parents, I was adopted and lived my life as Gary Stewart, the best parents in the world, best family in the world. And when I was 39 years old, my biological mother tracked me down, and I immediately wanted to know who my father was. And that would be a journey that I'm still on. It never ends, the story that never ends. And as it turns out, I believe completely that I have provided the evidence that will actually close the Zodiac Killer case. I believe, without a doubt, that my father was the Zodiac Killer from San Francisco from the 60s.
Right. So
and that's the big hook.
Right. And let's just make this very clear that everything up until your mom finding you, we know that you were part of this ice cream romance kind of scandal that was going on at that time, because you're
illicit romance. Yeah.
Right. And she was very young, and he was much older than she was, and her parents obviously were trying to keep them apart, and they were on the run and all these other sorts of things. So in the end, what happens is that when you find your mother is when all the pieces kind of start coming together for who the father is. So that's what this docuseries is going to be based on, is this find and hopefully closing the case of the Zodiac Killer once and for all. So let's get back to that docuseries, and what can we expect, you know, of all the things that you obviously can tell us right now before it's released. What can we expect from this docuseries, and kind of pulling this all together and kind of making your dream come true of this making its way onto the big screen?
Well, you know, that is my hope.
Or at least the television, right?
That this will end it. Will just end all that for me, and I can get on my horse and ride off into the sunset and be done with this. But what I will say is that I believe it was not a coincidence being adopted into the Stewart household.
Sure.
Those people, I believe God used them to raise me with whatever it takes to come back and tell a story. Actually, my parents, Lloyd and Leona Stewart, were instrumental in me writing my story. They said, you know, if we didn't have the newspaper articles and the police reports, we wouldn't believe it either. You can't make this stuff up. So I shared that story basically to say that even if you were not wanted as a child, even if you did not have the best beginnings, that there's hope, because you know, God can take something evil and broken and he can make that good, and he can make it right, and he can give hope. So my story basically got sold, of course, because of the Zodiac Killer thing is why HarperCollins picked it up. But I went to Hollywood in August of last year. My wife and I went, and I had 3 days to pitch 10 different companies, major networks, Warner Brothers, MGM, Paramount, Discovery, of course, Netflix, FX. And there was one guy who wanted a redo because the president was not there. John Landgraf, the president, who is considered the mayor of television by his associates, said he wants to tell, you know, he wanted to hear it from me. And I sat in a hotel room and told my story over Skype to him, the president. And he says, Gary, I have let some other people take good stories from me, and I want to be the one to tell your story. I don't care if your father was a Zodiac Killer or not. I want to share your emotional journey.
Right.
To me, that's all of my hopes that God's in control of the story falling into place.
Right. And you know, Gary, I have to back you up on that, because every time I've heard you talk about this, I've interviewed you before on it. We've talked extensively just as friends over the last several years, and I'm very appreciative of that friendship, by the way. And every time you tell it, you always reach back to the fact that this was a blessing to you because of the Stewart family, and because that was such a fantastic childhood and upbringing, and continues to be such an important turning point in your life. And you were 30 days old and didn't even know it was coming.
Right.
So
they're just they're the blessing. You know, they're one of the many blessings in the story. So you know, I'm just excited we're here, and I got the right guy.
When is it? When is it? When can we see it? What can we expect? When's it coming?
Let me tell you what I know. What I know is, was it Monday night or Tuesday night after dinner? Christy and I went to dinner, and I just looked on Facebook, and Susan and my executive producer, Campfire Films, who bought the story, posted that John Landgraf had just announced to the world that The Most Dangerous Animal of All has been picked up for a series. And I'm like, you didn't even tell me, guys. Susan didn't know. The producer didn't know. So the thing with selling your story is you also sell your right to talk about it and your right to advertise. So I have been bound by this contract for over a year. I have not been able to tell anybody it was coming out on FX. I don't know when. That's the honest truth. First, we thought it was in the fall, but we're not finished. We're shooting one of the last episodes now. I'm guessing late winter, February, maybe. I don't know.
That's awesome.
To pick the perfect time slot.
Well, I want to have you back when it releases and talk about what this does to you after, because I followed you every step of the way, and it is, I'm really just looking forward to this coming out and watching it and continuing to watch this story hopefully provide evidence one way or the other so that you can close this curiosity that you have, because I'm sure it's now been with you for over a decade, and it's now time to, hopefully this will get the California type folks on this case and say, okay, let's give it one more go. So
over and done with. All I can tell you is out of the, I don't know, dozens, hundreds of hours that I've interviewed in telling my story, the one thing, I've never seen any of the clips, right? So I don't know what it's going to look like. All I know is I think we're going to give Mr. Langer what he wants. I think, Christy says every time you meet somebody, they always know more about you than you'll ever know about them, because you poured your life out onto the pages. Well, they're going to know even more after this documentary, and I hope it does what I think God wanted me to do with his story.
No doubt at all. And speaking of it coming out in the winter, I have Jim Winter, the king of winter, here to talk a little bit about what's going on at the Columbia Theater. So tell me, Jim, we had just a couple weeks ago, we were with the Chamber of Commerce here in Hammond, and they did the most interesting Hammond Chamber of Commerce lunch I have ever seen, ever. What happened at this lunch? And when they decided to have this at the Columbia, I could just see our artistic director